Oh, hello there, and welcome to Phil Talking D20. So, what are we talking about today? Well, it's magic items, and why, as a GM, you should dabble in the arcane and mystical arts of making your own magical items, because it's quite cool and pretty simple to do. Now, there are some caveats when it comes to making your own magic items. How much damage should they do? What abilities should they add? Why are you adding them? And as always, it's always best to take a balanced approach. So, one of the reasons I'm making this video is lately I've been kind of going through the process of running a campaign and having a good dabble in what magic items are available. Now, looking at Pathfinder 1 versus Pathfinder 2, Pathfinder 1 is kind of end of life and has huge numbers of additional books that add lots of magical item content. It's the same with 3.5 D&D and 5e D&D. Every time they add a new book, there's normally a smattering of magical items. Some books are just lots of equipment and items, and they keep adding more and more and more. Pathfinder 2 is at an early arc, and so although there is a very good broad selection and there's lots of the classics in the core rulebook alone, the like I said, when I talk about classics, I mean things like Boots of Elvenkind, ones that are kind of synonymous with gaming, really, thanks to D&D and, if you like, the Tolkien influence on gaming. A Cloak of Elvenkind. We know where these kind of items come from. But it's important to not just look at what's in the book and think, oh, that's it, so I'm stuck and I can't do anything cool. I'm just going to have to wait for more books. You don't at all. So I think the most important decision about why you should create a magic item is the theme first. And a great source for themes of magic items are Pathfinder gods, existing items, like rebranding them, and perhaps, quote unquote, the previous generation of heroes that might have had items that have been left to go out into the world. So I'm going to start with reskinning first, because that's a super simple one, and I can give you a couple of quick examples of how you can do that with a skill very, very easily. So to start for 10, the Demon Mask. It's not a particularly high level item. It grants a +1 to Intimidate, and as an activate once a day ability from memory, you can cast the innate fear spell. So it adds that little kind of cool little quirky perk that you've got this little spell kind of slotted in. That's already giving us a really good example of what kind of framework you can often find with items. Quite often they'll bolt in a little spell. And the Skeleton Key is another good example of this. +1 to thievery checks to pick locks. Once a day it can cast the knock spell, which effectively gives you a +5 on one roll. All said and done, that's pretty straightforward. So they're already showing us the kind of the tools that they've used to create the items they've created. But what do I mean when I say reskinning an item? So a demon mask automatically has some connotations that it might have a demonic visage that maybe doesn't suit certain characters and certain character concepts, and might even just not work in how you use and kind of want to use items in the world. It's going to be hard to walk about town casually wearing a demon mask, looking really monstrous and scary, especially with the kind of the connotations that they have. However, what if there is a very stern, very intimidating character from history, and you just reskin it? A good example of this is I renamed the demon mask the death mask of Khazad Grundin, and made it the kind of helmet, kind of face visor of a very stern, stoic, kind of glowering dwarf, and had exactly the same effects. +1 on Intimidate, and the Fear spell. It's just that I had flavoured it in a manner that just changed, I suppose, the in-game social kind of resonance of the item, and that's all you need to do sometimes to make something quite cool and quite quirky. A good example from Lord of the Rings is Sting, reputedly a magic sword. What does it do? It glows when orcs are near. Now, you can easily drop that into your own game, but it doesn't have to be orcs. Could be it glows when a red dragon is near, or it glows when ogres are near. And that doesn't automatically make it a +5 Berserker Longsword of Death. You could easily give that to a level 1 player. It's not giving them any damage bonuses, it's not giving them any stat bonuses, it's not giving them any skill bonuses, it's just a cool, quirky trait. What if this particular magic sword, when you kill someone, turns them to stone? It's not doing anything, it's just petrifying them after you've already killed them. And perhaps it sets the tone for if you reduce them to 0 hit points but they're quote-unquote dying, not completely dead, it doesn't turn them to stone. And so that it's almost like a way of transmitting to the player that the character is still alive, and then if they finish them, that's when it turns them to stone. It's not game-breaking, it's not doing anything particularly horrendous, but it's giving a weapon a unique kind of flavour without being a +7, 4d6 fireball death machine. Which, if you can avoid doing, please do avoid doing, because simply going, I'm going to make a magic item that does 46 bazillion points of damage, yeah, it's not very cool, is it, really? Another good example of theming a magic item and looking for a way of combining things. Eristal, Old Deadeye. He is this kind of naturey, kind of antlered god, very similar to Cernunnos, a Celtic kind of deity from kind of Bronze Age, Iron Age Celtic world of our world. Also Cernunnos, the Horned God, probably where he comes from to an extent. Longbows, hunting, nature, all those things. There's an arrow called an Antler Arrow that basically you can have as an item. Why not make a very simple, straightforward +1 bow that once per encounter can generate and fire an antler arrow? There you go. There's a simple magic item, very flavoured and tailored specifically to a deity, and a cool handout that's not crippling. It's not going, oh yeah, you can do 4d7 times 5 damage to orcs because you picked up this bow that you found at level 3 in a dungeon. What it's doing is it's just something cool and flavourful. Maybe a character would really gel with that and think, cool, that's my jam, I'll keep that, I'll put some runes on it, I'll develop it. It's an option. Iomide, she is the kind of Healy, fire, kind of divine solar deity, valorous, combative. There is another good example of where you can pull spells from. There's a paladin focus spell called Sunblade that basically enables them to add some fire damage, and if the target's evil, some good damage, and if the target's undead, some holy damage, all meted out, I think, in D4s and or D6s. And it's a focus spell. So you could have the +1 longsword of Paladin Uthrain, a famous Iomedean paladin from the past, and all his sword is a +1 sword that can once a day cast Sunblade. So they can't go into every encounter at level 1 or 2 and go fireball, 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 fireball every round. they can, in a cool bit of an encounter, summon this kind of celestial champions kind of power for the briefest of moments and throw a Sunblade at someone. And they might not hit. So if you're already kind of going, oh my god, this is an outrage, it's totally insane and breaking game balance because I'm an absolute RAW nerd. Well, you're quite boring probably. But that's my point. Like, you don't have to go straight to 11. I mean, at higher levels, 11 becomes necessary. Because again, you can see in the magic item progression, because magic items have levels, they get more powerful. But like I said, there's nothing stopping you looking at kind of lower levels and just creeping more items in to give a bit more flavour, to make things a bit more tailored. Good example of an item I just created, the Sword of Mars. Roman campaign, Mars, God of War. Could have just gone and stuck more runes on it and made it do more damage, but the game is already providing that, and that's not kind of particularly exciting. Something unique is, and kind of specifically tailor-made, is always more interesting. So the character went through this kind of ritual kind of process in the Temple of Mars and ended up with a sword that, much like a Wondrous Figurine of Power, can summon, in this case, a wolf. The Figurine of Power that can summon a dog for 6 hours. I effectively took that ability, which is like a level 2... what do they call them? I've just used the word, but don't worry about it. You know what I'm talking about, even when I don't. Figurine of Wondrous Power, thank you, well remembered. Taking that as an item and merging it with a sword, I purposefully didn't make the sword do any more damage. I didn't go, oh, now it's +5, 40d8, nuclear-powered sword. I just went, okay, so the sword can now summon one of the sacred animals of Mars, the god of war, which is a wolf. I mean, it could have chosen Woodpecker, another one of his sacred weapons. But I think the player would have been slightly confused as to why summoning a Woodpecker kind of embraced the real spirit of Mars, the war god, whereas suddenly going, oh, I've summoned a wolf, not an animal companion. This isn't giving you an animal companion, it's just giving you a level 1 wolf, which is cool and funky, and you can use some kind of, get some use from. But it's unique and it's cool. You can kind of step through the gears of that process quite easily once you've got an idea about what you want to do, and then you've looked through existing items and existing spells and thought, oh, I could take some of that, oh, I could have some of that, oh, I could pull some of that in. Look for another good example. I'm curious. Torag. Here we go. This is an easy one. So like a dwarven warhammer that gives you +1 on crafting checks to craft metal weapons while you're blacksmithing. It doesn't even need to be a +1 weapon. You could literally give that to a level 1 character playing a dwarf and go, oh, you've got a family relic. And you could do this for all your characters at level 1 and just go, yeah, you've got this kind of semi-magical weapon. There you go. It's flavoured and tailored around kind of the crafting traditions of dwarves, so it'll give you a +1 on crafting checks if you want to do any blacksmithing. Now that character might be like, oh, why doesn't it do 4d8 extra damage so I can kill orcs better? And you can say, because you're a munchkin and you don't deserve that at level 1. But they will then take that item and think, cool, this is a custom item, no one else has got this item's all mine. Maybe I should do a bit of crafting. And who knows where it takes you? Who knows where that arc goes? Maybe they, across the next kind of 6-7 months of your campaign, suddenly become an artisan master crafter and start churning out kind of items and equipment and doing kind of cool stuff with that whole kind of character arc that only landed in their lap because you gave them a random item. Could happen. Stranger things have happened. You can even use factions. You don't have to just look at deities. When you've got so many kind of rich and varied factions in Galorian, you've got Pathfinder Society, Hell Knights, Knights of Last Wall, the Lion Blades. You can take some of these kind of units and think, what what kind of an item would they create for their members to help them do their job better? So that maybe at level 3, and they've just done some useful stuff for this organization, they can be given a very cool, tailored item that kind of really reflects the nature of their work and pushes it out into the world and is that kind of cool, unique reward. Let's have a quick look. The Eagle Knights are the protectors and defenders of the people of Andoran. The group itself consists of 4 sub-factions: the Steel Falcons, who sound cool, if a little cheesy, who protect Andoran's interests beyond its borders; the Golden Legion, Andoran's defenders and the commanders of its army; the Grey Corsairs, nautical agents who specialise in fighting the slave trade; and the Twilight Talons, spies and deep cover agents. So, picking one of those and going with the Grey Corsairs, nautical agents who specialise in fighting the slave trade, you could have, let's just go with like a cutlass, because that's like a very associated with kind of pirates and naval warfare kind of weapon. So you could have a cutlass that gives you +1 on law seafaring to help you with those, checks while at sea. And you could also maybe give it a spell-like ability that frees people from bonds, like the Paladin's kind of liberating step, where you grant a character the ability to kind of get a bonus on a check to escape and like free themselves and get a bit of free movement. You could look at that kind of an option, and it ties directly into the theme of that unit. They're at sea, nautical skill, useful. They deal with slave traders and slavers, having prisoners tied up that you don't have to run over and untie. You can just kind of once per day, free that slave, get them getting out of the scenario that you confronted, and you get focused on steaming into fighting the villains. Happy days. Wonderfully tailored custom item. And with runes and magic items being clearly very prevalent in the world of Golarion, hence why there's a whole table chock-a-block full of magic items from level 1 to level 20, which means at level 1 you can get access to minor magic items out of the gate in a core Golarion world. Does it seem so strange that churches and physical organisations within the world would create tailor-made items to better themselves at their tasks and their jobs against foes who will most definitely also be using magical items? So don't be afraid to think about these kind of things. What if the Hell Knights, you create a set of manacles that have like planar lock or dimension, lock, or if you run a certain distance away from the Hell Knight that puts them on your wrists, you take a d6 piercing damage. Say if you get more than 30 feet away from the Hell Knight, d6 piercing damage, flat. And that's what the manacles do. And then put them out there, see what happens in your game. What if they get captured by a Hell Knight and they have to risk running away from them and taking persistent damage before they can get to a place where they can take their manacles off? Why wouldn't you do that as a Hell Knight? Like, it's not unreasonable to think that's something they would want to do with magic. And again, we've seen a precedent set with all these wonderful items dropping in things like spell-like abilities and things. You've got a plethora of options to look through when it comes to low-level spells. Try not to rush into second and third level spells. Try and dabble in cantrips and first level spells. That's a really good grounding point. Focus spells, again, give you a really good guide on low-level but very reusable spells, because this is an important thing to think of. Focus spells are basically per encounter spells. A normal character's spell slots, apart from cantrips, obviously, which are all day, every day, to coin a phrase. When we're looking at kind of spells, it's a level 2 spell, it's a level 3 spell. I get 3 of those a day, then I need a long rest to regenerate them. Focus spells, not the case. You need 10 minutes or complete an action that obviously directly appeases and pleases your god to instantly refill them, leading to such loopholes as healing gods, when you use your healing focus spell, instantly renewing your focus pool because you've completed a task of looking after someone and doing something that they would find, a reward for a focus point. You kind of infinite cycle. There's not many cases where that is kind of arguable, and it doesn't really matter anyway, because you have a big fight, you're blatantly going to be able to find 10 minutes to rest, meditate, regenerate your focus pool, and get focus spells back. So again, focus spells are a great place to look at for, can I slot this ability into this weapon once per encounter? I've just done that with another weapon. I added a sword as a gift from the Celtic god of thunder and lightning, Tyrannus, also known as Thor, much later down his kind of evolutionary arc in the real world. Bob's your uncle, lightning god, a lot of talk about the kind of the speed and the ferocity of storms kind of rushing around in his kind of general vibe. I put once per encounter lightning damage on a blade, and you can even use it on a miss, but obviously it's only once per encounter, and this as lightning kind of arcs off of it. Bob's your uncle. It increases by a damage die if there is a thunderstorm happening, which sounds really cool and funky. How many times are there going to be thunderstorms? As many times as the GM wants. Maybe never. Maybe every day. Who knows? But you have control of it as the GM, and it's only once per encounter. Now, when you've got abilities where characters can, like rogues with sneak attack and things like that, add multiple dice pools, you're not out of the realms of unreasonable. Again, looking at focus spells and being able to go a character, or even how cantrips heighten, so that you can be a spellcaster who at higher levels keeps dumping quite potent spells. Just a d6, it's not the end of the world, is it? As long as you're staying on the cautious side of sensible, you're not going to make anything game breaking. And even if you want to look at other editions, so looking at Pathfinder 1 and just lifting an item almost verbatim out of Pathfinder 1, or even D&D 5e or 3.5 or 4th edition D&D, looking in other books and going, oh, I really like that item, and then just taking 10 or 15 minutes to really read it, really get into the vibe of it, and then having a trawl through existing magic items in Pathfinder 2 and going, well, that's very close to that, and that's very similar to that, and that's almost identical to that, so that's at that level and that kind of cost, that's where I'm going to slide it in. Happy days. Balance is always there if you bother to look for it. So get involved, get some custom magic items set up for your next loot hoard, because that's the great and best opportunity to kind of dump stuff in. So if you are right now, as we speak, going into a dungeon as the dungeon master, halfway through a dungeon as a dungeon master, at the end of a quest arc where they're about to go and see the NPC and give them the good news that that is complete and there might be the opportunity for a reward, have a sit down, look at what your characters are into, look at what themes they're kind of getting involved in. I talk about themes a lot because they're important. The narrative theme should be always the most important thing at your table, other than fun. Narrative and fun in that mix. Maybe you've got a rogue who isn't necessarily always being I pick the lock and look for traps kind of rogue and is kind of branching out into new areas. Maybe there's something you can give them to support them with a skill that isn't one of their core skills that they're automatically getting benefits and favours to from the class build, but they quite enjoy using. Maybe slide them an item that's custom built for the particular thing they're getting into that they enjoy doing, but they can't risk focusing on too much because of the core concept of the build requiring other areas of interest. Maybe they really like, and this is, because let's be honest, magic items don't always need to be combat focused. Maybe they really like talking about how their character does painting in their downtime. So maybe have a shrinking easel that grants +1 on crafting checks to paint. And so they can take this little easel out of their pocket and say the command word Abjuran, and it turns into a full, easel with a canvas on, and they can do some painting and then say Abjuran, and it shrinks back down and they pop it in their pocket. If their character has talked about doing that thing a lot, they're going to love that item. The barbarian who's never mentioned painting and keeps telling you how he wants a new axe, he ain't going to be happy if you give him that. But you could give him an axe with the spirit of one of his ancestors in, that, gives him on a DC 20 fortitude save an extra round of rage. And if he fails the fortitude save, he takes a point of damage. That sounds terrifying and cool. Is he tough enough to accept some of the spirit energy of his ancestor into his body to hold on that one extra round of combat longer with some kind of ancient kind of bloodline infused soul magic from his ancestor? Is it +1 to hit? No. Is it +1d6 extra damage? No. Is it 1 extra round of rage if he passes a fortitude save? Cool. Like it? Do it. Get stuck in. Make some magic items. Let me know in the comments below what you've made. How disastrously wrong it went in game, where you went, well, I thought that a Vorpal lightsaber, that could cut through anything in the hands of a level 3 character would be fine, Vil. But it turns out it wasn't. No, it wouldn't be. Don't do it. Level 15, probably all right. Have a think, have a dabble, have a gamble. Like, subscribe. Stay tuned for the next video next week. Peace out.